She put a lien on our house? She never removed her name, the banker said. Your mother still owns half. Lily's hands shook. Last month her mom was silent. Now she was untouchable, traveling, donating, deleting her daughter like a bad memory. No fights, no warnings, just a postcard from the Maldives. Wish you were here, especially this week. The same week Lily skipped Christmas. Now her mother was gone. But not quietly. This isn't estrangement. This is a mother reclaiming everything she was forced to give up. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The silence in the house was so sharp, it felt like it could slice through her skin. Teresa stood over the empty dinner table, one hand still gripping the back of the chair where Lily always sat, where she should have been tonight. Outside, snow danced under the porch light. Inside, the only sound was the faint ticking of the antique wall clock, its rhythm louder without laughter to compete with it. Teresa's roast chicken had gone cold an hour ago. The wine, untouched, still wore its cork like a sealed promise. She had told herself not to take it personally. Mom, I really want to be there, but Paul's mom isn't doing well. She's fragile and this might be her last Christmas. Lily's voice had trembled just enough to sound sincere. Teresa had softened instantly, even suggested they do a makeup dinner next week. Lily agreed. That was 2 days ago. Tonight, Teresa's phone buzzed. A message from her cousin in Arizona. Hey, is Lily with you? Just saw this and thought of you. Attached. A photo from someone's Instagram story. Lily, laughing in a warmly lit kitchen, champagne in hand, standing beside her mother-in-law who wore a glittery reindeer sweater. Not a wheelchair or oxygen tank in sight. Just hors d'oeuvres and matching pajamas. Teresa zoomed in on Lily's face, carefully made up, eyes bright. Her daughter looked happy. But not the kind of happy that comes from doing the right thing. It was a careless happy. A holiday happy. The kind Teresa hadn't seen from her in years, not even last Christmas, when she'd cooked an entire dinner alone while Lily scrolled TikTok and complained about the stuffing being too old school. Teresa didn't cry. Not this time. She walked over to the fireplace mantel and gently moved aside the photo of Lily at graduation, Teresa's proudest day, though she'd sat in the back row to avoid making a scene if she cried. Next to it was a dusty jewelry box, barely touched since John died. She hadn't opened it in years. Her fingers hesitated, then clicked the latch. Inside was a tiny velvet pouch. She opened it slowly. Empty. That's right, she had sold her wedding ring 5 years ago, used the money to help Lily with a down payment on her first car. Lily had cried when Teresa gave her the keys, hugging her tight, whispering, "No one sacrifices like you do, Mom." Teresa didn't need to be reminded of what she'd given up. Tonight, she was reminded of what she no longer had. Space in her daughter's life. She sat down on the couch, pulled a blanket over her lap, and turned on the TV, half-heartedly flipping through channels until the remote fell from her hand. Her eyes, dry but glassy, wandered to the side table drawer. She opened it. Inside, a colorful brochure peeked out from between old recipes and a forgotten Sudoku book. Maldives. Heaven on earth. Private bungalows. Crystal clear waters. Teresa had picked it up 6 months ago after Lily mentioned it in passing. Ugh, that's my dream trip, Mom. But it'll never happen unless we win the lottery. Teresa turned the page. There it was. The exact photo Lily had once screenshotted. A wooden bungalow standing over turquoise water, white curtains blowing in the breeze, a woman in a robe sipping coffee on the deck. For the first time that night, Teresa smiled. She stood, walked over to her laptop, and opened it with purpose. Her hands didn't shake, not once. She clicked "Book Now" and didn't blink at the total. First-class flight, overwater bungalow, 7 days, all-inclusive. She closed the lid and looked around the empty room. The gift-wrapped box she had bought for Lily sat quietly under the tree, unopened. Teresa didn't move to pick it up. Instead, she poured herself a glass of the wine she had been saving for family. She lifted it toward the Christmas lights reflecting in the window. "To new traditions," she whispered. Then she turned to her reflection and said aloud, voice steady, Let's give her something to remember this Christmas by. The first breath Teresa took on the island felt like it belonged to another version of herself, someone softer, braver, and finally done asking for space in rooms she built. She stepped off the boat and the scent of salt water and frangipani wrapped around her like a silk scarf. It wasn't a vacation. Not really. It was a quiet reclamation. A young man in a linen shirt greeted her with a cool towel and fresh coconut water. "Welcome to Coral Ember Villas, ma'am," he said with a smile that reached his eyes. Teresa thanked him, her voice light but distant, as if it still hadn't caught up to her body. The resort was a blur of palm shadows, gold-tinted pools, and quiet staff who spoke in hushed tones like every guest was a secret. Teresa followed the concierge along a stone path over turquoise water until they reached her villa, a private bungalow perched like a promise above the sea. She paused at the doorway. The thatched roof, the white curtains swaying in the ocean breeze, the teak deck with 2 lounge chairs and a single white robe folded neatly on the bed. She recognized it all. This was the bungalow, the one Lily had once screenshotted and sent to her with the message, "One day, huh?" Now it was hers, alone. Teresa tipped the concierge, then walked in slowly, like she was entering someone else's dream. That night, she didn't unpack fully. Instead, she opened a leather-bound journal and began to write. Not about Lily. Not directly. She wrote about the first time she'd held her, about scraped knees and dance recitals, about minivans and missed promotions and the time Lily had mono and Teresa slept on the floor next to her for 5 nights straight. She wrote about sacrifice, but not in a bitter way. She wrote as if she was cataloging memories before auctioning them off to the sea. When she woke the next morning, the ocean light had already filled the room. It poured in through the glass doors, turning the cream-colored walls golden. Teresa slipped into the robe, tied it carefully, and walked barefoot onto the deck. The boards were still cool from the night air. She set down her coffee on the side table and picked up her phone. The camera lens caught the moment perfectly, her face calm, robe cinched, ocean sparkling behind her like a secret she had finally decided to keep for herself. Click. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Later that morning, she wandered into the tiny boutique near the spa. Rows of postcards lined the wall, scenes of hammocks, coral reefs, and sunsets too perfect to be real. She picked the one with the exact view from her bungalow. The woman at the register asked if it was a gift. "No," Teresa said, "just a little memory." Back at her room, she sat at the desk and stared at the blank space on the card. She began slowly, her handwriting steady. "Wish you were here, especially this week." That was all. No "love, Mom." No explanation, no emotional pull, just presence, just timing. She hesitated for a moment before flipping it over and pulling out her phone's contact list. Lily's home address was still saved, buried under favorites. Teresa filled it in, line by line. Street, city, zip code. Then she paused. The final box stared back at her. Return address. Her pen hovered. Instead of writing, she drew a single line through the space. A deliberate absence, a silence of her own. She sealed the card and walked barefoot to the small drop box beside the front office. When she slid it in, something shifted, not in her, but around her. The wind picked up slightly. A bird cried overhead. Somewhere far away, a bell rang. And the sea, always listening, pulled her message away like it already knew where it was going. The silence didn't come all at once. It started in fragments, unreturned messages, ignored calls, a phone screen lighting up and fading into black again. And for the first time in her life, Teresa didn't rush to explain herself. The bungalow was warm with candlelight as night fell across the Indian Ocean. A breeze slipped through the open doors, carrying the smell of grilled fish and something citrusy from the resort's kitchen. Teresa sipped her wine slowly, her phone face down on the table, buzzing beneath her hand like a distant knock she refused to answer. Earlier that afternoon, she'd muted every notification. Not just for Lily, but for everyone. The only sound she wanted now was the lull of the waves brushing up against the stilts beneath her feet. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Lily's third text had gone unread. "Mom, Just checking in. Everything okay? Call me when you can. When there was no reply, she followed it with a call, and another. Then a voice note that hung in the air, unheard. Hey, it's Christmas, and I haven't heard from you. Look, I know it was last minute, but I really thought you understood. Please don't be mad. When Teresa didn't respond the following morning either, Lily added a group message to the family thread. Just checking in. Mom hasn't responded since Christmas. Anyone heard from her? Teresa saw the message when she checked briefly before breakfast and let it sit there, unopened. She tapped Do Not Disturb, turned her phone over again and left it on the bedside table. That evening, dressed in a cream sundress and a pair of sandals she hadn't worn in years, Teresa made her way to the resort's cliffside dining terrace. The sky bled shades of orange and lavender. She requested a table for one, but a woman nearby raised her wine glass and gestured with a warm smile. Traveling alone? The woman asked. Teresa hesitated, then nodded. First time. The woman leaned forward. Same. Joanne, she said, extending a hand. Her silver curls framed a face that had clearly seen both softness and storms. Teresa. They clinked glasses. Joanne had that kind of ease about her, someone who didn't need small talk to fill silence. Conversation flowed. She had been a divorce attorney for 20 years before retiring to freedom, fiction, and the occasional flirtation. So, why are you here? Joanne finally asked. Her tone was gentle but direct. Teresa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She swirled her glass, letting the pause hang long enough to feel deliberate. I'm here, she said, because someone forgot who raised her. Joanne nodded, understanding in her expression. No further questions. She simply poured another glass and leaned back to let the ocean wind pull at her shawl. Later that night, Teresa returned to her bungalow and stepped out onto the deck. The stars above the sea were so bright they looked close enough to taste. She listened, not for the phone, but for herself. Something was shifting, and she didn't want to miss the sound of it. Back in the U.S., a mail truck bumped down the suburban road toward Lily's home. The postcard slid through the slot and landed softly on the hardwood entryway. The photo on the front was almost surreal: crystal water, a wooden deck, a hint of white robe in the corner. The caption read simply, Coral Ember Villas, Maldives. Lily picked it up on her way to the kitchen, glancing at it casually at first, then her eyes locked on the handwriting. Her breath caught. There were only 8 words. Wish you were here, especially this week. No signature, no return address, no explanation. But the message was unmistakable. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped the card over again, checking the postmark. It was real. Teresa was gone, on her dream trip, without telling anyone, without telling her. She stared at the card like it might change if she looked long enough, but it didn't. She was left holding a piece of paradise, and nothing else. Lily stared at the postcard for the 5th time. Her fingers curled around its edges like she could squeeze more meaning out of it if she just held tight enough. She gave a soft, forced laugh, the kind that people make when they're trying to convince themselves something isn't what it clearly is. Across the kitchen, her husband, Paul, looked up from rinsing out a bottle. "What's that?" he asked, drying his hands. Lily didn't answer right away. She turned the card over again, reading the same 8 words Teresa had written in that calm, unshaken handwriting. Wish you were here, especially this week. It's from my mom, she said finally, but her voice carried a note Paul hadn't heard in a while. Uncertainty. Looks like she's in the Maldives, he said, peeking over her shoulder. Lily gave that laugh again. Yeah. Weird, right? She tried to smile, but something in her face had started to sag, as if gravity had found a way into her bones. Paul narrowed his eyes. I thought she was spending Christmas alone. She said she was fine. Lily shrugged, tossing the postcard onto the counter like it didn't weigh 100 pounds. Maybe she booked it last minute. But neither of them believed that. Paul leaned against the fridge, watching her closely now. You okay? Of course. Lily's answer came too fast. She picked up her phone, thumbs already typing before her face even changed. She scrolled through her call log. 2 missed calls to Mom. No return. She tapped to call again. Voicemail. Again. Hi, it's me. I I got your card. Maldives, huh? That's... wow. Anyway, just checking in. Call me?" She ended the message and stared at the screen, as if expecting it to flicker back with a reply. It didn't. The silence on the other end wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. Teresa, thousands of miles away, was not thinking about calls. She was thinking about nothing at all, deliberately. She floated in a private plunge pool outside her bungalow, the water warm against her skin, her eyes shielded behind dark sunglasses. Joanne lounged beside her, reading a mystery novel and sipping something bright orange with a mint leaf. "I can't believe you've never done this before," Joanne said. "I used to say I couldn't afford to disappear," Teresa murmured. "Turns out, I just never gave myself permission." Joanne smiled, but didn't press further. That was their unspoken rule. Speak only when it adds peace. Later that afternoon, Teresa booked herself a full-body massage, an island photography session with Joanne. We need at least one frame-worthy scandalous shot. And a reef tour the following day, the kind of itinerary she once thought was reserved for honeymooners and influencers. As she signed her name for the massage, she remembered something Lily had once said while rocking her youngest to sleep. "I won't take a real vacation until the kids are old enough to forget I was gone," she had whispered. Teresa had chuckled at the time, thinking it was sweet, sacrificial, motherly. Now, floating under the Maldivian sky, Teresa whispered to herself, "Looks like I learned from the best." Back home, Lily opened Instagram. She clicked on her mother-in-law's profile and uploaded a photo from Christmas night, just the two of them, laughing over dessert. Her mother-in-law wore a silver tinsel crown, the caption already forming in Lily's head. "She's my real angel." She hit post. Teresa saw it later that evening, in her bungalow, while finishing a coconut tart on the deck. She scrolled past it without blinking, without zooming in, without even saving it. Instead, she turned her phone face down and reached for her wine glass. The ocean was louder that night, louder than Lily's silence, louder than the caption, louder than the apology that hadn't come. The postcard wasn't the message. It was the envelope, the soft knock before a storm, the whisper before a scream. Lily didn't know that yet. She only knew that ever since that cream-colored rectangle landed on her doorstep, she hadn't been able to stop checking the mail. She paced the kitchen in her robe, clutching her coffee like it was a defense weapon. She had reread that first postcard 10 times over the last 3 days, as if the ink might reveal a second meaning if she held it at the right angle. It didn't. Paul watched her from the breakfast table, cautiously flipping through his tablet. He didn't say it aloud, but he could see it. Something in Lily had cracked. Not snapped. Not yet. But cracked. "You're acting like you expect another one," he finally said. She blinked. "What?" "You keep looking out the window every time the mail truck stops." "I'm not. You are." Lily set her mug down too hard. It clinked against the granite like a warning. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Teresa was writing again. Her bungalow was half-packed. The scent of lavender from the resort's turn-down service still lingered in the air, mixing with the salty breeze. Teresa sat at the wooden desk in a soft robe, hair still damp from her final spa visit, and slid a new photo onto the table. It was worn at the edges, the colors faded but the image sharp enough to cut. Teresa, no older than Lily was now, smiling with a young Lily in her lap. One hand gripped a half-built sandcastle, the other holding an ice cream cone melting down her wrist. Behind them, a cheap beach motel and an old car with a cracked windshield, back when dreams were smaller but still reachable. Teresa flipped the photo and began to write on the back of it, "Your mother once gave up dreams to raise hers." That was me. She stared at the words, breathed in slowly, and folded the photo into a thick envelope. No postcard this time. No resort branding, just the photo, the sentence, and silence. She addressed it the same way as before, Lily's home. But this time, she taped the envelope shut like she was sealing a memory back inside a box. Then, she dressed in linen pants and sandals, tied her hair up, and took a quiet walk down the sun-dappled street toward a local post office beside a surf shack. She dropped the envelope in, nodded at the man behind the counter, and left without waiting for a receipt. It was her final morning on the island. But before she left for the airport, Teresa made one more stop. This one tucked far behind the resort's usual tourist spots. A small sign near the end of the beach read, "Island Legal Advisory, by appointment only." Inside, a slim woman with sharp glasses and a calm voice welcomed her. "You said this was time-sensitive?" Teresa nodded and passed her a file folder. Inside, estate documents, copies of her will, financial statements. "I'd like to transfer the following assets," she said, "into a limited liability company, anonymous. I'll name the LLC, but it must not trace back to me. Ever." The woman's brow rose slightly, then quickly returned to neutral. "That's doable. May I ask the purpose?" Teresa offered her a practiced smile. "Let's just say I'm preparing for a different kind of inheritance." 2 signatures later, it was done. Back home, a week passed before Lily found the envelope. She hadn't checked the mail in 2 days, part protest, part denial. But that morning, she opened the box and saw it, cream-colored, unmarked, except her name in handwriting she knew instantly. Inside was the photo. The message on the back made her breath stop cold in her chest. She sat on the staircase and stared at it, her knees trembling. The simplicity of the sentence hit harder than any confrontation ever could. She didn't even notice Paul come in behind her. "Everything okay?" Lily couldn't answer. She just shook her head slowly, eyes wide, lips parted like she wanted to speak but had nothing left that wouldn't crumble out. The next day, another envelope arrived, this one from her loan servicing agency. The message inside was curt and clinical. "Your student loan has been paid in full. Account closed. Anonymous third-party beneficiary." Lily's hand flew to her mouth. She read the line again, then again. "Some silences follow you home. They don't knock, they don't ring the bell. They just slip through the cracks, curl into corners, and wait for you to hear them." Teresa stepped into her kitchen and knew instantly this silence had been waiting for her. She closed the door behind her. The air inside felt different from when she'd left it. Not dusty, not stale, just quieter, like the house had been holding its breath in her absence. No calls, no messages, not even a missed one. She hung her coat, slipped off her shoes, and walked into the kitchen where the light from the window painted long shadows across the floor. The orchids Lily had gifted her last Mother's Day were still alive, surprisingly, but just barely. Teresa touched one of the petals gently. "Still holding on," she murmured. "Just like me." She didn't unpack right away. She didn't check the fridge or turn on the TV. Instead, she walked through each room as if reacquainting herself with the version of her life she'd left behind. Everything was still there, just slightly. More still. Outside, a neighbor across the street waved cheerily. "You're back. How was the cruise?" Teresa smiled, non-committal. "Warm." They laughed politely. No one asked who she went with. No one ever really did. Back inside, she set to work. New locks on the front and back doors, passwords changed on her laptop, her bank accounts, her email. She added 2-step verification on everything, including her cloud storage. It wasn't paranoia, it was peace, a version of control she hadn't realized she'd given away so many years ago. And then she opened the drawer beside the sink, the one she never touched anymore, and pulled out the dusty silver recorder. Not for music, for memory. She slipped it into her pocket. That night, Teresa made herself chamomile tea, turned off all the lights but one, and sat at the small kitchen table with the recorder and her phone. She scrolled through old voicemails. Most were spam. A few were reminders. And then, there it was. A voice memo saved from December of last year. Lily's voice, young and bright, almost theatrical, echoed through the speaker. "Hey, Mom. I know we already talked, but I just wanted to say, Christmas won't be the same without you. We'll miss your mashed potatoes and your ridiculous snowman cookies. Promise we'll do a makeup dinner soon, okay? Love you." Click. Teresa didn't move. She stared at the tea until the steam disappeared, her hands folded in her lap. Then she picked up the recorder and pressed the red button. Her own voice, lower, calmer, came out steady. "I never needed the dinner. I never needed the cookies. I needed to matter, outside of convenience. You said we'd do a makeup Christmas, but you never asked if I'd still be waiting for one." She paused, then ended the recording. She didn't send it. She never intended to. She saved it into a private folder labeled Unsent. Just as she was closing her laptop, a small chime broke the stillness. A notification. She opened the screen. Power of attorney request submitted. Pending verification. The name flashed beneath the header in clean, sterile font. Lily Andrews. Teresa didn't blink. Her eyes stayed fixed on the words like they were written in fire. The house was silent again, but it was a new kind of quiet now. Not absence. A warning. When the doorbell rang, Teresa didn't flinch. She simply looked up from her tea, took a slow breath, and walked toward the sound like someone opening a door they already knew wouldn't stay closed. She opened it, and there was Lily, holding a bouquet of blush roses and smiling like the past few weeks had been nothing more than a misunderstanding. Her tone, her expression, even her posture, all rehearsed to disarm. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was sugar-laced. "Just checking in." Teresa stepped aside without a word. The familiar scent of Lily's perfume floated in first, expensive, too floral, too loud for the quiet house. Lily walked in as if she'd never left a silence behind, placing the roses on the kitchen counter with just enough dramatic flair to be noticed. "You look great," she added, glancing around. "The house looks the same." "It usually does," Teresa said evenly, moving to fill the kettle. Lily lingered in the doorway, then followed her to the kitchen, heels clicking against the tile like punctuation. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About us. About how things have been left." Teresa didn't answer. She pulled 2 cups from the cabinet, steeped the tea, and motioned toward the table. Lily sat. There was a strange choreography between them, one born from years of forced politeness at family dinners, of unresolved tension beneath birthday candles and Christmas wrapping paper. Lily took a slow sip before launching into it. "So I talked to Paul, and we think maybe next winter you could come stay with us for a while, during the holidays, just for comfort company." Teresa met her eyes calmly. "You mean convenience?" Lily blinked. "What?" "Convenience," Teresa repeated gently. "It's an easy mistake to make. Love often hides behind logistics." "I'm trying, Mom." "I can see that." Silence again. Long enough to let truth settle like sediment in a glass of water. Lily set her cup down, the soft clink louder than it needed to be. "Look, about my mother-in-law. She wasn't as sick as we thought. We were being cautious. It was complicated." "Everything is," Teresa said, "until it's not." The air in the kitchen cooled, not because of the weather, but because the warmth was no longer mutual. Teresa didn't raise her voice, didn't accuse. She simply refused to fill the silence Lily had carved between them over the years. Lily stood. "I should go. I have the kids' rehearsal and—" "Of course." She moved toward her mother, then stopped short, hesitating for the briefest second before offering a hug. Teresa returned it, lightly, politely, the way strangers hug at memorials. As Lily pulled away, her eyes flicked toward the side table near the door, where a small stack of unopened mail sat beside a half-folded coat. She reached to straighten the pile out of habit, and that's when she saw it. A glossy paper bag tucked halfway under the coat, ocean blue with white stitching. The logo unmistakable. Coral Ember Villas. Her fingers brushed the edge. Inside, a folded silk scarf in tropical print and a small paper card with the villa's name embossed. She froze. Her smile cracked, just for a second, but Teresa saw it. Lily looked up as if to say something, but Teresa had already turned back toward the kitchen, rinsing out her cup, humming softly under her breath. The melody was unfamiliar. Free. It wasn't a phone call or a text that delivered the blow. It was a hashtag. Teresa was sipping coffee when she found out she'd been erased from another celebration. Not accidentally, not quietly, but with balloons, matching outfits, and a caption that made her fingers curl around the mug like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She hadn't been scrolling for anything in particular. Her phone buzzed with a push notification from an old friend tagging her in a comment. "Look at your grandbaby, growing up fast." The link led to a story posted on an account she rarely visited, Lily's dog's Instagram. Yes, the dog. Teresa tapped. A video played, balloons floated across a decorated backyard, rainbow cupcakes stacked in the shape of a dinosaur, her grandson shrieking with laughter as he swung a plastic bat at a piñata. Lily's voice was loud and cheerful behind the camera. "Best birthday ever for our little man," she said. Teresa didn't breathe. She tapped again, this time opening the main post. A carousel of smiling photos. Lily, Paul, the kids, and Lily's mother-in-law standing front and center, holding the birthday boy in her lap. The caption read, "Grateful to have real family around us. Blessed, Joss birthday vibes. Joss family, first real family." Teresa didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain was too old now. Familiar, like the ache in a bone you stop talking about because no one believes it still stings when the weather changes. She stood, crossed the room, and opened the hallway closet. On the top shelf sat a wrapped box, blue and gold paper with tiny stars, carefully folded corners, and a silver ribbon. Inside, a handmade wooden puzzle with her grandson's name carved into it. She took it down, walked to the dining table, and began to remove the tape, piece by piece. Her hands moved slowly, reverently, like a ritual. She folded the paper and set it aside. Then she opened a storage bin, placed the gift gently inside, and closed the lid. She didn't write a card. She didn't reach for her phone. That night, Teresa sat by the window as a storm gathered in the distance, wind rustling the trees, thunder growling low like something just starting to stretch awake. Her tea had long gone cold. The phone rang. "Joanne." "I saw the post," she said without even saying hello. "So did I." "She didn't even blur your grandson's face. She blurred you." There was a silence. "Still think it's just a misunderstanding?" Joanne asked gently. Teresa's voice was low, even. "It's not a misunderstanding. It's something deeper." She paused. "I just haven't shown her how deep yet." The wind rattled the glass lightly, like a quiet knock from nature itself. Joanne exhaled. "You ready for that?" "I'm past ready," Teresa said. "I've been rehearsing." She stood, walked into the den, and pulled out a small leather file folder tucked beneath an old tax box. Inside were documents, property shares, co-signed loan records, a copy of her will with notes scribbled in red ink. She pulled out her phone, tapped a number she hadn't used in months. "Hi," she said when the receptionist answered. "I'd like to schedule a meeting with a family estate consultant." As soon as possible, the receptionist offered a time for Friday morning. "Perfect," Teresa said. She looked out the window again as lightning flashed silently in the distance. Before hanging up, she added one last thing. "I'm not contesting anything," she said. "I'm just making sure that what's mine doesn't get mistaken for theirs." She ended the call. Outside, the storm broke with a sudden crack of thunder, but Teresa didn't flinch. She just smiled. It was buried under 10 years of paper and dust, but it was still there. Teresa's name, printed in black ink, just beneath her daughter's and son-in-law's on the original deed. Not faded, not forgotten, just ignored. She ran her finger across the document slowly, feeling the weight of her own signature. Her initials, looped and careful. Back then, it had felt like love, a helping hand, a mother's promise. Now it read like leverage. She had almost forgotten about it herself. Almost. It started with the file folder she unearthed after her call with the estate consultant. She spent that night combing through old financial records, each receipt, each transfer, each time Lily had said, "Just until we get back on our feet." Every favor was neatly archived in a plastic bin beneath her desk. Teresa had kept everything. She always had. Not because she expected repayment, but because she was used to cleaning up the details others forgot. The house documents were at the bottom of the stack. She remembered the day she co-signed like it had happened last week. The young mortgage broker had smiled too wide, his gelled hair stiff as he slid the papers across the table. "It's just a formality," he'd said, "but without her credit you're the anchor." Anchor. She had nodded, proud and a little nervous. Lily was glowing, pregnant with their first, dreaming out loud about nursery wallpaper and a backyard swing set. Teresa had been the bridge between their dream and the bank's approval. Now she was the one being left off invitations. Out of frames, out of family. The next day, Teresa sat in a lawyer's office with wood-paneled walls and the faint scent of old books and espresso. The attorney, a composed woman named Marla, adjusted her glasses and scanned the document in silence. "You're still listed as a 48% owner," Marla confirmed, "which gives you legal rights over all refinancing, sales, and property-level decisions. They can't make any major financial moves without your consent." Teresa's face didn't change. "Can I file a lien?" Marla tilted her head. "You can. It's unusual given you're listed as a co-owner already, but a lien would give formal notice that no one can touch your equity, not without direct documented clearance." "Good," Teresa said. "Then let's do that." She left the office with a copy of the draft paperwork in her purse and a lightness in her step that had nothing to do with vengeance. It was clarity. It was record-keeping. It was, finally, being accounted for. That night, back at home, she poured herself a glass of wine and opened an old voicemail archive on her phone. Most were ordinary, reminders, check-ins, birthday wishes. Then one caught her ear, a voice recording from 2 years ago. Lily's voice laughing in the background of what sounded like a house tour. "We'll knock that wall out once Mom's gone. Open it up, make it a proper office, finally some space." Another voice, Paul's, chimed in with a chuckle. Teresa sat frozen, the wine glass untouched in her hand. She hit play again, and again. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. She reached for her phone, pressed delete, and set the device face down on the table. Then, she opened her laptop and filled out the last remaining information on the lien request. The screen glowed pale blue in the dim kitchen light. "Reason for filing?" She typed slowly. "To protect current ownership." Stake. She hit submit. Outside, the wind shifted. A mailbox creaked on its hinges down the street. Teresa didn't hear it. She was busy drawing a line. The call from the bank came just after lunch, while Lily was folding laundry and Paul was balancing their budget spreadsheet on his laptop. She had been humming, a rare good mood settling in, when his voice turned flat. "They denied it," Paul said, blinking at the screen. "The refinance. It didn't go through." Lily looked up, still holding a half-folded hoodie. "What do you mean denied? Why?" Paul scrolled, then paused. His eyes sharpened. "It says here, blocked. A legal hold from a partial co-owner. Someone placed a lien." The hoodie slipped from her hands. "That's not possible. No one else owns this house, except—" Her voice faltered, but the name hovered between them. "Your mom?" Paul said it like a question, but the answer had already settled in his gut. Lily grabbed her phone without another word. The doorbell rang at 6:12 p.m. Teresa opened the door before the second knock. She was expecting this. Lily stood there, cheeks flushed, hair pulled back too tight, fury vibrating just beneath her designer coat. "Can we talk?" she snapped. Teresa stepped aside. "Of course." Paul followed behind, quieter, jaw tight but not angry. Just weary. He offered Teresa a nod. She returned it, then led them into the kitchen, where the table was already set with a pitcher of lemon water and 3 glasses. As if she'd been waiting for them. Lily didn't sit. "You filed a lien on our house?" Teresa poured herself water. "On my house, partially. Yes." "You did this to punish me," Lily accused. "To get back at me for Christmas, for the postcard, for—" "What? Not inviting you to the party?" Teresa stirred her water, the spoon clinking gently against the glass. "No, Lily, I did this to protect what I built, what I helped you build. You don't even live there. I helped you own there." Paul cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Look, Teresa, I understand you're upset, but this has real consequences. We needed that refinance to consolidate debt and—" Teresa looked directly at him. "And you were going to do it without telling me, without even considering that my name still lives on that deed, that I helped make that house happen when the bank wouldn't touch you." Lily threw her hands up. "You always bring that up. It was 10 years ago. And you've been reaping it every day since," Teresa said calmly. The air in the room felt charged, like a match had been lit, but hadn't reached the flame yet. Teresa remained seated, composed, while her daughter hovered like a storm cloud waiting to burst. "You're doing this out of spite," Lily hissed. "Don't pretend it's noble." Teresa stood, slow and steady. "Number, I'm doing it because I've finally stopped waiting to be remembered. This isn't revenge, it's clarity." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It landed. Paul looked away. He shifted awkwardly, then spoke, barely above a whisper. "Maybe we should have involved her sooner." Lily spun toward him. "Seriously?" He didn't answer. The silence between them stretched. "I can't believe this," Lily muttered, grabbing her bag. "I don't even recognize you anymore." Teresa tilted her head. "Maybe you never really looked." Lily stormed past her without another word. Paul lingered. He looked back at Teresa with something unspoken in his eyes. Not quite guilt, not quite apology, but something softer. "I'm sorry," he said. Teresa nodded. "I know." He closed the door gently behind him. That night, Teresa sat at her desk, lighting a lavender candle and opening a book she'd been meaning to read. The house was still, but not empty. There was a new presence in it now. Boundaries, long overdue. Just as she reached the second chapter, a knock at the door startled her. Not a knock. Mail. She stood and opened it. A thick envelope sat on her welcome mat, addressed in firm, expensive handwriting. From Law Offices of Hamilton, Keene and Bray. R.E. Property dispute and demand for release of lien. Teresa bent down, picked it up, and held it in both hands. Her fingers didn't tremble. Not anymore. The envelope sat on Teresa's kitchen counter like a dare. Thick, stark, embossed with a name she recognized but had never needed to fear before. Hamilton, Keene and Bray. It smelled faintly of printer ink and pressure. She didn't open it right away. She made tea first, not because she was avoiding it, but because she wanted to read it on her terms, with steady hands and a clear mind. She stirred a single spoon of honey into the mug, walked back to the table, and sat down as if preparing to read the final chapter of a book she already knew the ending to. Then she opened the envelope. Legalese unfolded in cold surgical precision. This letter serves as formal request and demand that Teresa L. Monroe immediately release the lien currently filed against the property located at... She stopped reading. It wasn't shocking. What was shocking was how unsurprising it felt. There had been no olive branch, no conversation, no grace, just a calculated retaliation. Just another attempt to wrestle control under the guise of being reasonable. Teresa picked up her phone and dialed her attorney. Marla answered on the second ring. "I was just about to call you." "They sent it." "I assumed they would," Marla said. "You ready to respond?" Teresa glanced toward her filing cabinet. "I've been ready for 10 years. 3 days later, both legal teams met in a modest courtroom. No jury, no dramatics, just quiet paperwork, quiet arguments, quiet truths finally being spoken. Lily sat across the aisle, her posture ramrod straight, her lawyer whispering into her ear as if this were all an unfortunate misunderstanding. Teresa didn't look at her. She looked at the judge when she spoke. She handed over a binder, neatly tabbed and organized, filled with copies of the original co-signed deed, bank transfers for down payments and property taxes, voicemails saved and transcribed, screenshots of text messages confirming her financial involvement, birthday cards she never mailed but kept, with receipts tucked inside and a photo, one of Lily in her 20s, beaming in front of the sold sign outside the house, with Teresa standing just behind her, hands clasped like someone watching a future they helped build. The judge reviewed everything in silence. Then he looked at Lily. "Your mother's documentation is extensive. The lien stands." Lily's jaw tensed, but she said nothing. Teresa didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply turned and left the courtroom without saying goodbye. That night, her phone rang. Paul. She let it ring twice before answering. "Hi. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for all of this." Teresa said nothing. "I know what she's doing isn't fair. I told her to stop." But she won't, Teresa inhaled. Then you're watching the fire, not putting it out. There was a long silence. She doesn't know I called, he finally admitted. I figured. You didn't deserve any of this. No, Teresa agreed. I didn't. Paul's voice broke slightly. We were young. She thought you'd always be around. Teresa's eyes drifted to a drawer across the room, one she hadn't opened in years. Tell your son I said happy birthday, she said softly, then hung up. The next morning, Teresa pulled out an old shoebox from the back of her closet. Inside, carefully stacked, were photos from Lily's childhood, birthday parties, ballet recitals, homemade Halloween costumes, all pieces of a version of motherhood that had been slowly rewritten by absence. She chose one. Lily, age 6, asleep on Teresa's lap at the zoo, a melting snow cone in her hand. Her face, open and trusting. Teresa turned the photo over and wrote in blue ink, "Remember when I mattered?" She slid it into an envelope. No note. No return address. Just the picture. And a silence that spoke louder than anything else could. She walked it to the mailbox herself, lifted the flag, walked away without turning back. It started with a photo, a soft smile, a white robe, a woman holding a postcard in one hand, coffee in the other, ocean behind her like a dare. The caption read, "This is what reclaiming looks like." Joanne had posted it without fanfare, without tagging Teresa, just a quiet tribute to resilience on a niche community page for women over 50. It was meant to be small, fleeting, but pain, especially the kind women bury for decades, has a way of catching fire. Within 24 hours, the post had 3,000 likes. By the end of the week, it had crossed 1 million views. The comments came like a flood. This made me cry in a parking lot. I just sent this to my daughter with no caption. My mother did this. I didn't understand until now. Tell her we see her. Tell her she's not alone. And then, do we know who she is? Why does this feel personal? Wait, is this the woman from the Maldives postcard thread? The ripple grew sharper, deeper. Joanne called Teresa 3 days after it began to snowball. I should have told you I was posting it, she said. It felt beautiful. I didn't expect... Teresa was quiet on the other end. Then simply, it's okay. You're going viral. I'm aware. You good? Teresa looked out her window. The sky outside was overcast, soft light stretching across the hardwood floor. Her phone buzzed again. Another friend request. Another message she wouldn't answer. I don't know what good looks like anymore, she said, but I'm not shaken. Lily's phone buzzed in the middle of brunch with her friend Marissa. She picked it up absent-mindedly, scrolling through notifications. Her thumb froze over a link. The image was familiar. Too familiar. Her mouth went dry as she clicked. There, on screen, was her mother, framed in ocean air and gentle strength. The postcard, the same one Lily had shoved into a drawer weeks ago, now front and center. Caption, she want Ed silence. The world gave her noise. Marissa leaned over, squinting. Isn't that your mom? Lily minimized the screen too fast. Number I don't know, it's just some TikTok thing. People post all kinds of stuff. Marissa tilted her head. Weird. She looks exactly like the woman from your Christmas story. Lily forced a laugh, but her ears were ringing. Sweat gathered at the base of her neck. At the table beside them, a stranger's phone played the same clip, the sound of ocean waves. A quote from the post read aloud in a soft, pained voice. Lily stood abruptly. I need to go. At home, she locked the door behind her and pulled the postcard from the drawer. She studied it like it might crack open and explain itself, but it didn't. She flipped through her feed, posts from her own account, now peppered with subtle comments. Hope you're checking on your mom. Family first, huh? Interesting caption, considering what's circulating. Her hands trembled. For the first time in weeks, she called her mother, not out of control, but out of fear. No answer. Teresa, meanwhile, had taken to early morning walks. Her phone stayed off most of the day. She no longer needed it to measure her worth. But one message caught her eye, an email from a local lifestyle reporter who had seen the viral post and connected the dots. The subject line read, Would you like to tell your story? The body was polite, empathetic. No pressure. We're interviewing mothers who've stepped away from toxic expectations. If you're open, we'd love to share your voice. No names needed unless you're ready. Teresa stared at it a long while. Then, she replied, I'll do it, but on one condition. My daughter can't know it's me. Until the end. She hit send. Outside, the wind picked up. A bird landed on the windowsill, pecking twice before flying off. Inside, Teresa felt it for the first time in years. Control. Lily didn't know she was in it until the video was almost over. At first, it was just background noise. Another shared clip sent in a group chat titled, "This Gave Me Chills." She clicked without thinking, one thumb still scrolling through her inbox. Then she heard the voice. Low, calm, controlled, and hauntingly familiar. The video began with a still frame, a woman in a robe, standing on a deck over turquoise water, holding a postcard in one hand and a coffee mug in the other. Her face was turned slightly from the camera, anonymous but striking. The interviewer's voice cut in. This is a story about a mother who stopped asking for space and took it. The woman never gave her name. The video blurred her face just enough to preserve the illusion. But the voice, measured and deliberate, spoke of birthdays missed, dinners eaten alone, and conversations answered with silence. She didn't cry. She didn't accuse. She just spoke. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. I wanted to stop begging to be visible in a life I helped build. Lily leaned forward. Paul, seated across the room on the couch, looked up from his laptop. What is that? He asked. Lily didn't answer. On screen, the woman continued. She once said she wouldn't vacation until her kids were old enough to forget she was gone, so I gave her the gift of forgetting. A photo flashed across the screen, blurry but unmistakable. A child asleep in her mother's lap at the zoo, then another, a Christmas tree, a graduation, a silent Thanksgiving table with one chair empty, wine glass untouched. Lily's fingers tightened around her phone. Her heart started to pound. No, she whispered. No, no. The final segment played without narration, just music, gentle piano, a slideshow of moments, childhood drawings, a letter with crayon writing, I love you, Mommy, a clipping from a report card with Teresa Monroe listed as emergency contact, and then the image, the bungalow, the same white curtains, the same angle from the postcard, and on the table, that same postcard, her handwriting on the back. Wish you were here, especially this week. The screen faded to black, and then appeared one final slide. Signed, Teresa. Lily's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Across the room, Paul sat up straight. Wait, that was your mom, wasn't it? The phone in Lily's hand began to buzz. Messages, Instagram, texts, group chats, comments flooding in faster than she could open them. That's your mom, right? This can't be real. You let this happen? Tell us it's not about you. She stood, phone clutched tight, breath shallow. Her face had gone pale. She walked into the hallway, away from Paul, away from the noise. She opened her contacts. Mom. She hit call. Teresa sat in her living room, a candle flickering beside her. The sun had dipped below the horizon an hour ago, casting the entire room in a soft orange afterglow. Her laptop was closed. Her phone rested screen down on the side table. It began to ring. She didn't need to look to know who it was. She heard every vibration, every tiny buzz. It sounded like a heartbeat. But she didn't move. Instead, she sipped her tea and looked out the window. She wasn't angry. She wasn't afraid. She was still. Across town, Lily held the phone to her ear until it stopped ringing. No voicemail, no answer, just silence. And for the first time in her adult life, she realized what it meant to be left out of someone else's story, to be the unanswered knock, the person on the outside, the one no longer invited in. Lily used to think silence was passive, an absence, a blank space waiting to be filled. But now, silence felt like a hand pressed gently, but firmly, against a locked door. A door that wouldn't open, no matter how many times she knocked. She had sent flowers first, a gorgeous arrangement of pink peonies and white lilies. She included a handwritten note. I saw the interview. I didn't know how much I'd forgotten. Please, can we talk? No response. Then came the emails, one each day for a week. Polite, careful, laced with apology, but always a little too late. I'm sorry, Mom. I miss you. Tell me how to fix this. Still nothing. Voice notes followed. On the third one, her voice cracked. I was wrong. I thought you'd always be there. I thought I had time. Please, just call me back. But Teresa didn't. Because she was in Italy, the cobbled streets of Florence welcomed her like an old friend. She traveled with Joanne, both women carrying nothing but light luggage and the kind of freedom they'd never known they could choose. They sipped espresso in alley cafes, took photos beneath gold cathedral domes. They laughed so hard one night over a shared bottle of red wine that the waiter asked if they were celebrating. We are, Joanne had smiled. In the quiet hours, Teresa wrote postcards, none addressed to Lily. And she did something else too, something quieter. She made a donation, anonymous, sizable, to a local nonprofit for single mothers struggling to re-enter the workforce. It wasn't out of charity, it was out of understanding. She didn't need a name on a plaque. She needed to plant something that would grow where nothing had been nurtured. Back home, Teresa kept her days full. She joined a book club at the local library. She tried watercolor for the first time. She learned to make sourdough and gave her neighbors loaves without returning calls. But each night before bed, she did the same thing. She opened a leather-bound journal and reread the page she had written weeks ago, just one line in simple black ink. I needed her to feel what I did. Forgotten, invisible, edited out. The journal stayed on her nightstand. The photo Lily posted that Christmas, her and her mother-in-law in matching reindeer pajamas, holding wine glasses captioned, "Grateful for my real family," remained folded in the back, not out of spite, but precision. She finally deleted the Maldives photos from her phone, not because they didn't matter, but because they no longer needed to. The printed copies remained, sealed in a weathered shoebox. On the lid, she had written one word in neat block letters, P-E-A-C-E. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a final word. It was an end she had chosen. Then, one Sunday afternoon, Teresa heard a soft knock. Not the doorbell, not urgent, just present. She moved toward the front door slowly, a towel still draped over her shoulder from folding laundry. Through the peephole, she saw a blur of movement. Shoulders hunched, head down. She opened it gently, and there stood Lily. No makeup, no plan, just tears streaming down her cheeks and breath caught in her throat. Her lips moved before sound came out. Mom. Teresa didn't step back. She didn't close the door either. She just waited, letting the silence speak for her one last time. Lily had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways. Tearful apologies, dramatic embraces, a second chance unfolding like a movie ending. But none of those imagined versions had felt as terrifying as standing on her mother's doorstep, cold air tightening her chest, and seeing that door slowly creak open. Without a word, Teresa stood in the frame, composed, wrapped in a pale robe that seemed familiar, because it was. The robe from the postcard, the one from that photo. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look angry. She looked ready. Lily's voice broke almost immediately. Why did you ghost me, Mom? Her mother's eyes didn't flinch. I didn't ghost you, Teresa said softly. I gave you space. Space to hear your own silence. Lily's breath caught. She hadn't come with a script, just desperation. The kind that builds when you realize too late that you weren't forgotten. You were remembered in absence. I didn't mean for things to get this bad, she whispered. I was overwhelmed. I thought we'd have time to fix it. Teresa blinked slowly, as if weighing the weight of time itself. Lily stepped forward, just 1 inch. Can we start over, please? I'll do it right this time. There was a beat of stillness. Then Teresa opened her arms, not wide, not long, but enough for a single, brief embrace. Lily melted into it, clutching her mother's back like someone afraid of being left behind again. And just as quickly, Teresa pulled away. The front door stayed open for only a second longer, then slowly began to close behind her as she turned and walked back into the house without a word. Lily remained on the porch, breath catching in the quiet. Inside, Teresa moved through the stillness of her home with the grace of someone who had learned to walk through pain without it echoing. She set the kettle on, the whistle sounding faint and distant as she arranged her cup, her saucer, her teaspoon. Rituals she no longer rushed for anyone. She didn't look out the window to see if Lily was still there. She didn't have to. She already knew. Some ghosts don't haunt you. They wait on the other side of the door hoping you'll invite them in. But this was peace. As the tea steeped, she walked into the living room and sat by the bay window, where the morning light fell just right. Steam curled up from her cup, and outside, the wind shifted the trees in slow, graceful waves. She took a long sip. The robe, soft white cotton, the one from that ocean morning, still fit just right. She let the silence settle. Then she reached under the side table and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were the printed photographs from the Maldives. She didn't flip through them. She didn't need to. She simply placed one of them face up on the table. It was that shot. Her, seated on the deck of the bungalow, coffee in hand, ocean behind her like a kept secret. No filter, no smile, just presence. She placed her journal beside it and opened to the last page. The final entry was only one sentence long. She missed the holiday. I didn't miss the message. She closed the book. And finally, after months of choosing silence, of holding stillness like armor, Teresa smiled.